So I want to talk a little bit about, like, again, a lot of the people listening, they're smaller.
Yep.
They're not at 100 million. How did you talk a little bit about how you got customers back then? Like, there wasn't, and social media wasn't like what it is today. Like, what did you do to get customers? And then maybe talk about what you do today. I mean, now today I would think it's easier, but maybe it's not. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, today it's just at a different level. But back when we were pretty small, trying to figure out how to get customers, I'm not going to lie, there isn't really any secret to it. We just stuck to it. I can remember I'll give you an example of a company that probably everybody on the call has heard of. They've now been bought by a larger company, but there was a company that made, in our part of the world, there was a company that manufactured snowmobiles and four-wheelers that were called Arctic-Cat. Mm-hmm. Arctic-Cat is now part of Textron, but Arctic-Cat for years was a company that you wanted to do business with, and they won't mind me saying this because they're great people. Like, we still do business with them, but I literally drove 2.5 hours once a quarter for 2.5 years before I sold them anything. And when I sold them the very first thing, it was a fiber optic transceiver. It was nothing, right? But over the years, we eventually took over pretty much the entire IT component of their business from a sales and implementation and support perspective. Mm-hmm. And we did that over and over and over and over. And that's just what it took. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people who believe that I can hang this shingle out and people are going to come banging on my door wanting me to do work for them. And maybe that's true in certain areas. But I think from a long-term success perspective, that's not what it is. So that's how we did it, Robin. We didn't have our target list. We had this stack of paper that, I don't know if you can see my fingers. Let's see. Yeah. We had this stack of paper that was about 2 inches thick. If you guys remember, there was a company that did IT research back then. It wasn't all online like it is today. You'd buy these reports and you'd get these stacks of paper, and we'd just go through them. And we'd be like, yeah, I'd like to work with those guys. And we'd start calling on them, and we'd just lob calls and go visit and bring donuts and buy coffee. And like I said, sometimes we did that for years before we got to do business with them. But today, the number of people who have left us to go do business with somebody else because we took the time to build the relationship side is very, very small. I'll give you one really quick story along those lines as well. We had a casino. It happened to be me. He called me on a Friday afternoon at like 4:45. I remember this. And he said, I want to buy this model of firewall. I said, okay, great. I can do that. Let me ask you a question. And I started asking him questions. And those questions led to, well, I'll tell you what, let me get the right person on the phone with us on Monday morning, where we asked more questions, which led to, well, let's come on site, which led to more questions, which led to us refreshing his entire data center, entire network. And oh, by the way, he did buy a firewall, but he bought the right model. Mm-hmm. And when it was all done, I said, Rod, why did you do that? He said, I worked with the same company for about 7 years. And every time these types of questions would come up, he'd bring in a person, they'd sit there, and the sales guy'd sit there like he was a hungry dog, kind of panting, while the SE asked questions. And when I called you, in 7 days, you knew more about my business than they did after 7 years. So why would I not do business with you?
Yeah.
And that's how we did this over years. Taking a sidestep, I had a rep one time who lost a very large deal with a bank, and he called me whining and moaning and blah, blah, blah. And I finally just said, stop, let me ask you a question. How many kids does he have? I said, is he even married? And he goes, what does that have to do with this? I said, everything. That's why you lost. Mm-hmm. Because you wanted a sale, and the guy who won it happened to be a gal who won it, wanted the relationship.
Yeah. Tom, this is like, I cannot tell you how perfect what you're saying right now fits into my week. And it's not because I'm drinking, but I have to say this. Okay. So, because we do marketing for a lot of the smaller MSPs, one of the things we'll set up is call tracking. So we know exactly when calls come into their office from like Google, who click, Google pay-per-click or some other campaign we're running, right? And that way we can track. So today, what's cool, which you couldn't do 20 years ago, is we can tell you exactly how many calls are coming in, and I can listen to a call that somebody searched IT services, IT support, Fargo or wherever, and they click and they call the office, and we can listen to that call. And Tom, I cannot tell you how many times somebody will call in and they'll say something to the effect of, I'll give you an actual example. Somebody called in and said, I have 65 workstations and I need them all set up with docking stations. And, we just need them connected to the network. Like, is this something you can help me with? Or another one that came in was, I have a server, I have a server that's giving me some trouble. It's going down, coming back up. Is this something you can help me with? And I have listened to calls where like the person answering the phone will say, sorry, we don't do anything outside of a contract. You have to be an MSP customer. You have to be a managed client for us to take that, and hang up, walk away, or give the number of a competitor. So what I'm hearing you say is, and tell me if I'm misunderstanding this, like when an opportunity comes in, it's not always like, hey, we want to sign $1 million contract with you. It might be just a small project, but you get in there, you understand the situation, you build the relationship, and before you know it, you might. And even if it is a small project, you get in there, you do a great job, you expand that relationship. Again, provided the customer is the right customer and you can do a good job. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
That's exactly what you're hearing from me. And to take that just a half a step further, you want to get the opportunity to prove yourself to that customer. But just as important, you want the opportunity for the customer to prove themselves to you. Now, what do I mean by that? If you're brand new trying to build an MSSP or an MSP of any kind, you don't want every customer. Trust me. Mm-hmm. You just don't, because they're and here's the other thing that's really interesting. Somebody who might be the perfect fit for you may not even fit somebody that's considered to be your competitor. And somebody who's the perfect fit for somebody that might think they compete against you might be absolutely not a fit for you. So just, you've got to take this in small steps. The absolute worst thing you can do is take on a very large contract with the wrong customer.